Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little different today. Usually we take a specific event or, a trend, and we analyze it.
We drill down.
We drill down, exactly. But today, we are zooming out, way out. We are looking at, well, the operating system of human history itself. And I have to say, looking at the source material this week, it's a bit of a rude awakening. It's like finding out the game was rigged before you even picked up the controller.
That is a very apt analogy. It is rigged, or maybe a better word is. It's programmed. We're digging into a source text that deals with the very architecture of inequality.
And the chapter title doesn't pull any punches, does it?
No, not at all. It's called There Is No Justice in History, which is about as blunt as you can get.
It really sets the mood. Abandon hope, all ye who enter here. But the central question is one that I think, well, it haunts everyone eventually. Why is history so incredibly unfair? And I don't just mean bad luck. I mean structural unfairness. Why do we keep seeing the same patterns of hierarchy just repeating over and over? Rich versus poor, free versus enslaved, men versus women. It feels like every time you turn a page in the history books, it doesn't matter what century it is or what continent, someone is stepping on someone else's neck. Is that just who we are? Are we hardwired for this?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And if you look at the biological reality, the answer is kind of surprising. Humans don't actually have an instinct for mass cooperation.
We're not bees.
We are definitely not bees or ants. A worker bee doesn't need a constitution or a police force to tell it to gather pollen. It's just, it's genetic. It's hard-coded.
Yeah, you never see ants reading the Communist Manifesto. They just get on with it.
Precisely. But humans, we're messy, we're volatile, we're individuals. Biology didn't give us a script for how to organize millions of strangers into a city or a nation, so we had to invent one.
We created imagined orders.
Imagined orders. We devise scripts to tell us who fits there, who's important, and who's not.
And I think that's the mission of this deep dive, right? To unpack those scripts. Because the scary part isn't that we invented them. It's that these imagined orders, these artificial scripts, they're almost never neutral.
They're never fair.
Never. They always seem to sort us into winners and losers. So we're going to look at how these hierarchies start, often by total accident, and then how they get locked in by this terrifying thing the source calls the vicious circle.
It's a powerful concept.
And we're going to end on the biggest puzzle of all, the gender hierarchy, which apparently historians still can't quite figure out.
It's going to be a deconstruction of the myths we all live by, whether we know it or not.
Okay, so let's start with the basics then. Imagine orders and this illusion of natural hierarchies. The source makes this claim that hierarchy is actually necessary for large-scale cooperation. That sounds a little convenient for the people at the top, doesn't it? Why do we need it?
Well, it comes down to cognitive load and information processing, really. If you live in a small band of 50 people, like our ancestors did, you know everyone personally.
Right. You know Dave is a good hunter, but a bad liar. You know Sarah is trustworthy.
Exactly. You don't need a rank or a title to know how to interact with them. But what happens when you move to a city like ancient Babylon or modern-day New York with millions of people?
You're just surrounded by strangers. You can't possibly know everyone's character.
You can't. You can't personally vet every single human you encounter. So hierarchy acts as a massive information hack. It's a shortcut. It allows strangers to know, or at least think they know, how to treat each other without wasting all that time and energy.
It's basically a labeling system. You just slap a label on someone and you're done.
Think of the example from Pygmalion, or My Fair Lady if you prefer the musical. Henry Higgins meets Eliza Doolittle. He doesn't know her soul. He has no idea what her potential is. He just hears her accent, sees her dirty clothes, and immediately his brain slots her into a category, underclass. And that label tells him everything he thinks he needs to know about her.
And he feels entitled to use her for his bet, to talk down to her. He doesn't even think to ask for her consent because the hierarchy script in his head says, my rank is higher than hers.
Exactly. And this isn't just some dusty old play. The source draws a straight line to a modern flower shop. Imagine a modern-day Eliza working at the counter. A customer walks in.
She can't do a background check on him.
Of course not. She has to make a snap judgment. She looks at his shoes, the cut of his suit, and yeah, often his skin color. These are the social cues. She has to decide in a split second. Is this an accounting firm partner who's about to drop $500 on a big corporate arrangement?
Or is this a messenger boy buying a single daisy for his girlfriend?
And she adjusts her behavior, her language, her level of deference, all based on that guess. Hierarchy tells us who to bow down to and who we can safely ignore. It makes society efficient in a way.
But And this is the huge but, these efficiency tools are never, ever neutral.
Never. They always privilege one group over another. They divide people into these make-believe categories and then arrange them on a ladder.
And the people at the top of that ladder always, always claim the ladder is there because of nature or God. They never just admit, hey, we built this ladder because it's great for us.
Never. That is the universal pattern. Every single society claims its hierarchy is natural and inevitable while, laughing at the hierarchies of other cultures.
This is where the source gives this incredible comparison. It puts two documents side by side that are separated by nearly 4,000 years.
The Code of Hammurabi from ancient Babylon and the American Declaration of Independence.
It is a jarring comparison. I mean, it really makes you stop and think. But it perfectly illustrates how these imagined orders work.
It does. The dates are almost poetic, aren't they?
So Hammurabi, this is 1776 BC. And the Declaration is 1776 AD. The symmetry is perfect. Now, Hammurabi's code is famous for being this great law of justice, but when you actually read the text, it's a hierarchy manual.
It's a rule book for an unequal society. It explicitly divides the world into three classes: superiors, commoners, and slaves. And the value of a human life depends entirely on which of those buckets you fall into.
Let's get specific with the numbers here because they are just staggering. We always hear this phrase, an eye for an eye, but that only applies if you're equals.
Right.
If a nobleman knocks out the eye of another superior, yes, they knock out his eye, justice. But what if a superior knocks out the eye of a commoner?
He just pays a fine. 60 shekels of silver.
And if he knocks out the eye of a slave?
It's even less. 30 shekels of silver. And note, he pays it to the slave's owner, not to the slave. The slave is just treated like a damaged piece of cattle.
So the hierarchy literally quantifies human worth. A commoner's eye is worth 60 shekels. A slave's eye is worth 30. And this was sold as justice, ordained by the great gods Enlil and Marduk.
That was their reality. Now, you fast forward exactly 3,552 years, 1776 AD. Thomas Jefferson writes what might be the most famous line in modern politics: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal."
It sounds like the polar opposite of Hammurabi, right? Hammurabi says people are fundamentally unequal. Jefferson says they're all equal.
It sounds like it. But here is the profound irony. The American order that was established on that principle created hierarchies that were just as rigid in their own way as Babylon's.
Because all men didn't actually mean all humans.
Well, not even close. The American imagined order created clear hierarchy of men over women. It created a brutal hierarchy of whites over blacks and Native Americans. And of course, it created a hierarchy of the rich over the poor.
The cognitive dissonance here is just wild. Many of the men who signed that document, all men are created equal, literally went home that day to plantations worked by human beings they owned. Did they not see a contradiction?
For the most part, no. And that is the terrifying power of an imagined order. To them, the distinction between a white person and a black person, or a master and a slave, was as natural and as obvious as the distinction between a human and a horse.
So it wasn't hypocrisy in their minds.
To them, it wasn't. They genuinely believed that Africans were a different kind of human, or perhaps not fully human at all. So when they wrote The Rights of Men, they simply didn't include Negroes in that category. It was just their reality.
It's terrifying because it means you can be a moral person within your own system and still be participating in something utterly monstrous. I mean, Aristotle, one of the smartest humans to ever live, argued that slaves have a slavish nature. He thought it was biological.
He did. He argued that some people are born to be free and others are just born to submit in the same way the body is born to submit to the mind. He thought he was describing a biological fact.
When he was actually just describing the social structure of ancient Athens.
He was just rationalizing the world he saw. And the source argues we do the exact same thing today. We look back at Aristotle or the Confederates and we say, how could they be so blind? But we are just as blind to our own hierarchies.
You mean with wealth?
With wealth, absolutely. Ask a diehard capitalist today why the rich are rich. They won't say the gods ordained it like Hammurabi. They'll say it's merit. They worked harder. They're smarter. They took risks.
The classic, they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps line.
Exactly. Yeah. We justify this massive gap by claiming the wealthy deserve their privileges, the better health care, the Ivy League education for their kids, the superior nutrition, the better legal protection. We accept that if you have money, you get to live longer and learn more. We see it as sensible.
Even though the data just screams the opposite, we know that the single biggest predictor of your future wealth is the wealth of your parents.
Overwhelmingly. Statistically, most rich people are rich because they were born rich. Most poor people stay poor because they're born poor.
Yeah.
But our imagined order of capitalism tells us it's all about individual merit, just like the Hindu order told people it was about cosmic purity. We need to validate the hierarchy to make it feel fair.
So this brings us to the mechanism of how these things get started, because if it's not merit and it's not really biology, where does this hierarchy actually come from? The source introduces this concept of the vicious circle.
And this is such a crucial concept. The vicious circle explains how a hierarchy that starts as a completely random historical accident can become a rigid, seemingly eternal system.
So it's not some grand conspiracy by a shadowy cabal?
Usually not, no.
Right.
It often starts with a chance event, a historical accident. But then, to justify the outcome of that accident, people invent myths. Those myths then get baked into the institutions of society, the laws, the schools, the religions.
And those institutions then create a new reality that actually reinforces the original myth. It feeds on itself.
It becomes a feedback loop. Let's break this down with the case studies, because the details really show how insidious this is. The first one is the caste system in India.
A system that has defined the lives of hundreds of millions of people for 3,000 years.
And scholars believe it likely started with an invasion. Around 3,000 years ago, a group of people we call the Indo-Aryans invaded the Indian subcontinent.
So you have the invaders and the local population, a classic power dynamic.
Right. And the invaders were a minority. They were outnumbered, but they had the power. And they wanted to maintain their privileged status and their distinct identity. They didn't want to just assimilate and disappear into the larger population.
So they needed to create a system of separation, a caste system.
Exactly. And at first, it was just politics. We're in charge, you are the subjects. Pretty straightforward. But you can't hold a society together for 3 millennia, just on might makes right. You need a better story. You need a myth.
You have to make it feel legitimate. Cosmic, even.
So the political distinction was elevated into the realm of the cosmic and the biological.
And this is where the story of the Purusa comes in.
Yes, the primeval being. The myth says that in the beginning, the gods sacrificed this giant cosmic being to create the world. His eyes became the sun, his brain the moon. And the different classes of humans came from his different body parts.
The Brahmins, the priests and scholars, came from his mouth, which is why they speak to the gods.
The Kshatriyas, the warriors and rulers, came from his arms. The Vaishyas, the merchants and farmers, from his thighs. And the Shudras, the servants and laborers, from his feet.
So if you believe that story, then the social hierarchy isn't a political choice someone made. It's a biological, cosmic fact. A servant is literally made of different stuff than a priest. You can't change it.
And they enforce this with the genius and truly evil concept of pollution. This is the psychological lock on the door. The idea was that if a high-caste person touches a low-caste person or even eats food prepared by them, they become spiritually and physically polluted.
It creates a visceral revulsion, of a physical fear.
It makes segregation self-policing. You don't need a guard on every corner if the Brahmin is absolutely terrified of being infected by the Shudra.
And that system just grew and grew.
It metastasized. It split into thousands of subcastes or jaitis. It dictated everything. Who you could marry, what you could eat, what job you could have. It created the untouchables, the Dalits, people forced to live outside the village and do the most humiliating labor imaginable, like cleaning latrines.
And all of this persisted for thousands of years, long after the original Indo-Aryan invaders were completely forgotten. The accident of the invasion created a structure that took on a life of its own. It's a perfect vicious circle.
It is.
The second case study. This one hits a lot closer to home for the Western world, American slavery. We often think we know this story, but the source frames it as another one of these historical accidents. It asks a very simple question. Why Africans?
Right. Why not enslave the Native Americans on a massive scale? Why not poor Irishmen? If you asked a white supremacist in 1850, they'd give you a whole list of myths, because Africans are naturally strong but simple-minded. But that's the justification, not the cause. The original accident was much more pragmatic.
It was, as the source puts it, a collision of economics and biology.
Exactly. First, there's proximity. Africa is just closer to the Americas than, say, Southeast Asia. It's cheaper and faster to ship a slave from Senegal than from Vietnam.
Mm.
Second, there was already an existing sophisticated slave trade within Africa that Europeans could tap into.
So the infrastructure was already there.
It was. But the third factor is the real biological accident that sealed the deal for millions of people.
Disease.
Malaria and yellow fever. The American South, the Caribbean, Brazil, those were hotbeds for these diseases. And they originated in Africa. So, over thousands of years, people of African descent had developed a partial genetic immunity to them.
Whereas Europeans and Native Americans had absolutely no defense.
None. They died in droves on the sugar and cotton plantations. So if you're a plantation owner in the 17th century and you're just looking at your spreadsheet, the smart investment is African labor. Not because you think they're inferior, but ironically because they are genetically superior in that specific deadly environment.
Their biological advantage gets twisted into the rationale for their social enslavement.
Precisely. It was a cold, functional, economic decision. But, and here comes the vicious circle again, the United States was being founded as a pious, Christian, freedom-loving democracy. You can't just come out and say, we're enslaving millions of people because it's profitable. That sounds evil.
You need a moral justification. You have to invent a story that makes the victim look like they deserve their fate.
So the myth-making machine kicks into high gear. Theologians pull the curse of Ham out of the Old Testament to say God wanted black people to be servants.
So-called scientists start measuring skulls and publishing research papers claiming Africans have smaller brains and are less intelligent.
Doctors invent theories that black people are inherently unclean, that they carry filth and disease. They built an entire intellectual cathedral to justify the economic reality they'd created.
And this is where the circle closes and becomes so hard to break. Slavery legally ends in 1865. The 13th Amendment is passed, the original accident is over, but the myths are just getting started.
This is the part that explains systemic racism so clearly. Imagine it's 1895. Slavery has been over for a generation, but you have a black population that has been systematically robbed of wealth, denied any chance at education, and terrorized for centuries. So naturally, they're poor. They're uneducated.
And a white observer, let's say a banker in Atlanta, looks at them. He doesn't see the history of theft and oppression. He just sees the result. He sees poverty and a lack of formal education. And he thinks to himself, see, the myths were right all along. They are lazy. They are unintelligent.
He mistakes the effect of oppression for the cause of it. And because he believes that myth, he acts on it. Let's play out this scenario. A young black man in Alabama, against all odds, has managed to get an education. He's bright. He's qualified, and he applies for jobs as a clerk at that banker's firm.
But the banker has that myth lodged in his head. He thinks black people are unreliable and not suited for this kind of work, so he throws the application in the trash and hires a less qualified white kid instead.
Right. So the black candidate doesn't get the job. He remains poor. He can't move to a better neighborhood or afford to send his kids to a better school, and the banker looks out his window, sees no black people working in the good jobs, and says to his friend, see, I told you, they just aren't cut out for this kind of work.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The prejudice blocks the opportunity, and the lack of opportunity is then used as proof to justify the prejudice. It's maddening.
And just like in India, this fear of pollution became the main tool of enforcement. The whole system of Jim Crow laws, of segregation, wasn't just about keeping people separate. It was about a deep, visceral fear of contamination.
The source mentions the white-only beaches in apartheid South Africa, which is just biologically hilarious if it wasn't so tragic. People with lighter skin are far more susceptible to skin cancer from the sun. If anyone needed to stay off the beach for health reasons, it was the white people.
But the logic of the imagined order completely overrides biological logic. Segregation was never about safety. It was about status and purity.
There is one story in the source that, for me, just drove home how deep this delusion can go. The story of Clennon King.
Oh, that is a heartbreaking and absolutely terrifying example of the system at work. Clennon King was a black student who in 1958 tried to register at the University of Mississippi.
This isn't ancient history. This is in our parents' or grandparents' lifetime.
It's a living memory. He walked into the administration office to register for classes. And the system didn't just reject him. The state police were called and they arrested him.
Okay, so far, sadly predictable for the time.
But then, this is the key. A judge ordered him to be committed to a mental asylum.
A mental asylum, not a jail. An asylum.
Yes, and the judge's reasoning was that any black person who actually believed he could attend the University of Mississippi must, by definition, be insane. The imagined order was so powerful, so total, that directly challenging it was seen not as an act of protest, but as evidence of madness.
That is the ultimate form of gaslighting, isn't it? The system defines what is sane and insane based on its own lies.
That is the power of the vicious circle. It
Yeah.
doesn't just describe reality for the people inside it, it constructs it.
So, okay, we've established that these hierarchies are imagined, they're often accidental, and they're self-reinforcing. But I can still hear a skeptic in the audience saying, okay, but surely there's some biology involved here. Men and women are physically different. That's not a myth.
And this brings us to the next critical section. The source gives us a golden rule, a kind of maxim for distinguishing between what's biological and what's cultural. And I think everyone should, tattoo this on their brain.
Biology enables, culture forbids.
It's so brilliant in its simplicity. The idea is this: biology on its own is willing to tolerate a massive spectrum of possibilities. It's culture that steps in and says, no, you can't do that.
And the argument is, if something is truly unnatural, you don't need a law against it.
Exactly. Have you ever seen a law forbidding men from photosynthesizing?
No. Or a law setting a speed limit for humans running faster than the speed of light.
Of course not, because biology makes those things impossible. You don't need to waste time banning them. You only create laws and religious rules and social taboos to ban things that are biologically possible.
So the very fact that a culture has a rule against something is proof that it's natural in a biological sense.
It proves it's possible. If men didn't sometimes fall in love with other men, there would be no need for laws against it. The prohibition is an admission that the potential exists.
That completely flips the script on the whole "it's unnatural" argument, but people use that word all the time. It's unnatural for a woman not to want children. It's unnatural to be gay. Where does that definition of unnatural come from if it's not from biology?
It comes from theology,
Yeah.
specifically Christian theology. The argument is that God created organs with a singular specific purpose. The mouth is for nutrition. The reproductive organs are for procreation. If you use them for anything else, you are violating God's design.
But from a biological perspective, evolution isn't a designer with a plan. Evolution is a hacker. It's a tinkerer.
It's a total hacker. Evolution has no purpose. It just has change and adaptation. Organs evolve for one thing and then get co-opted for something else entirely. The source uses the mouth as a perfect example. Yes, it evolved for eating, but we also use it to speak, to kiss.
And if you are Rambo, to pull the pin out of a hand grenade.
Laughs. I love that image. Some prehistoric worm ancestor is looking down at Rambo and just screaming, "Stop! That is an unnatural use of that orifice. It's for algae only."
Exactly.
Or look at insect wings. This is fascinating. The leading theory is that they didn't start as wings at all. They started as little body protrusions, bumps, basically, that helped ancient insects absorb sunlight, like tiny biological solar panels.
So they were for regulating body temperature. They were heaters.
Yes. But as these little heaters got bigger and bigger to catch more sun, they coincidentally became more aerodynamic. They started allowing the bug to glide a bit when it fell. And from gliding, it's a short hop to actual powered flight.
So if a mosquito buzzes in your ear tonight, you could technically accuse it of unnatural behavior because it's using its solar panels to fly.
It just shows how absurd the unnatural label is when you apply it to biology. Unnatural is just a word we use to describe things our current culture doesn't happen to like right now.
And this applies directly to the history of human sexuality, doesn't it?
Perfectly. The source contrasts our modern taboos with, say, ancient Greece. In places like Thebes or Sparta or in the court of Alexander the Great, same-sex relations weren't just tolerated. They were often seen as a socially constructive, even the highest form of bonding between warriors.
Alexander the Great brought his lover, the Phaestion, home to meet his mother. And his mother, Olympias, who was a terrifying woman by all accounts, didn't bat an eye.
Mother Nature didn't mind. The ancient Greek culture didn't mind. It's only our specific cultural script that decided, much later, to forbid it. Biology is this wide-open playing field. Culture is the referee who shows up and starts blowing the whistle on random plays for arbitrary reasons.
So let's apply this framework to the biggest division of all, the gender puzzle. And first, we have to distinguish between sex and gender.
Yes, this is critical. Sex is the hardware. Male and female. XY chromosomes versus XX chromosomes. This is the biological reality. It's a hard, universal kernel. But gender, man and woman, that's the software. That's the cultural script we'll load onto that hardware.
The source has this great line that sums it up perfectly. Sex is child's play. Gender is serious business.
It's so true. It means being born a biological male is an accident. You don't have to do anything for that to happen. But becoming a man And more importantly, staying a man in the eyes of your society, that is constant, exhausting work. You have to perform your gender role correctly. You have to prove it every single day.
And what that performance looks like changes wildly over time and between cultures. The source paints this amazing picture, contrasting King Louis XIV of France with, say, Barack Obama.
The visuals are so powerful here. Picture Louis XIV in his official portrait. It's the 1700s. He is the absolute paragon of European power. He's the Sun King, the alpha male of his world. What is he wearing?
He's wearing a massive flowing wig of long curly hair. He's wearing silk tight stockings. He's wearing red high-heeled shoes with big bows on them.
And he's standing in a dancer's posture, showing off his shapely calves. He's got a huge ceremonial sword, but to our modern eyes, the whole outfit looks, well, it looks like he's in drag.
Yeah.
He looks incredibly effeminate.
But in his time, that was virility. That was what power looked like. Now you put that image next to a modern male leader, a prime minister or a president.
It's a drab gray or blue suit. Short, sensible hair, flat, boring shoes, no makeup, no accessories. Modern, dominant men try to look as dull and uniform as possible.
The source compares it to the animal kingdom. Louis XIV was like a male peacock, all colorful, loud, displaying his plumage to show dominance. Modern men in power are more like, I don't know, gray pigeons.
It's fascinating because it shows that masculinity has no fixed, essential look. The high-heeled shoes didn't change. The meaning we attach to the heels changed.
And it's not just fashion. It's about rights and perceived ability. Just compare ancient Athens to modern Athens.
The biology of women has not changed in 2,500 years.
Right.
Wombs, hormones, it's all the same hardware.
But in ancient Athens, a woman was basically legal property. She couldn't vote, she couldn't be a judge, she couldn't own property or sign a contract. The culture said, your biology, your womb, makes you irrational and unfit for public life.
And today, women in Athens vote, they run businesses, they serve in parliament, they are judges. If biology was the sole determining factor, that shift would be utterly impossible. The biology didn't change. The imagined order changed.
Okay, so gender roles are flexible. They are imagined orders. But, and this is the big frustrating but that leads us to the final section, there is one hierarchy that seems stubbornly, almost impossibly universal: patriarchy.
And this is the great mystery. We talked about race, that varies hugely by region. We talked about caste, that's very specific to the Indian subcontinent. But patriarchy, the system where men possess more power, status, and wealth than women, is almost universal across all of recorded history.
From Asia to Africa to the Americas.
Even societies that had absolutely no contact with each other. The Aztecs and the ancient Chinese never met, but both independently developed patriarchal systems. That seems like a coincidence that completely defies the odds.
Which forces us to ask the uncomfortable question, is there a biological reason after all? Is there something in the XY chromosome, some biological constant that creates social dominance?
And the source walks us through the three most common theories that try to explain this. And then, spoiler alert, it systematically and pretty convincingly dismantles all of them.
Okay, let's play devil's advocate. Let's try them on. Theory number one, muscle power. It's the simplest one. Men, on average, are physically stronger. They have bigger biceps, more upper body strength, so they just beat women into submission and took charge.
It's the caveman theory. Might makes right. But it falls apart pretty quickly when you look at how power actually works in human societies. First, strength is a very narrow metric. Women, on average, have more stamina and a much greater resistance to hunger, fatigue, and disease.
And historically, women have done most of the really back-breaking manual labor. Working the fields, hauling water for miles, carrying heavy loads, scrubbing floors. If just doing hard physical work equaled power, women should have ruled the world centuries ago.
Exactly. Meanwhile, men have consistently monopolized the soft jobs. Priesthood, law, politics, scholarship. You don't need to bench press 300 pounds to write a sermon or pass a tax law.
And even among men, the strongest guy is almost never the leader.
Right. If raw physical strength equaled power, the Pharaoh of Egypt would have been the guy who won the heavyweight wrestling match every year. But usually the ruler is a 60-year-old guy who can barely walk, and he's commanding an army of 20-year-old super athletes.
Or look at a modern crime boss. The Don isn't the guy out there breaking kneecaps. He's the old guy sipping espresso in the back room while other, younger, stronger guys break the kneecaps for him.
Because power in Homo sapiens depends on social skills, the ability to organize, cooperate, and manipulate, not on brute force. So the muscle theory just doesn't hold up.
Okay, dead end. Theory number two, the aggression of the scum.
Laughs. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
Mm.
The theory here is that men are, on average, more naturally aggressive due to higher levels of testosterone. So they are the ones who fight the wars. And because they control the military, they control society.
This one feels a little more plausible to me. I mean, historically, soldiers are overwhelmingly men. War and violence do seem to be a male-dominated industry.
That part is true. But the question is, does being the foot soldier make you the ruler?
Not necessarily.
Now think about it. Who actually runs the war? It's the generals. It's the politicians. Managing an empire or a complex military campaign requires diplomacy, logistics, long-term strategy, and organization. It's not just about charging into the fray with a bayonet.
You can look at Augustus Caesar versus Julius Caesar. Julius was the brilliant warrior, but Augustus was the shrewd politician. He was clement, he was manipulative, he built the alliances. He's the one who actually established the Roman Empire and made it last.
And this is where that scum quote comes from. The Duke of Wellington, the man who defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. He looked at his own troops, the brave man doing all the fighting and dying, and he called them the scum of the earth.
He didn't respect them. He saw them as tools to be used.
Exactly. The generals were aristocrats. They weren't the strongest or the most violent guys. They were the educated elite. So the real question remains, why couldn't women have been the generals? If the common stereotype is true that women are better at communication, social navigation, and manipulation, are those exactly the skills you need to run an empire?
So you could, in theory, have an all-male army of scum being led by an all-female aristocracy of brilliant strategists.
Theoretically, yes. Biology enables it, but it's never happened on a large scale. So the aggression theory explains why men are the soldiers, but it fails to explain why men are the generals.
Okay, another dead end. That leaves us with theory number 3. Patriarchal genes. This is the big one from evolutionary psychology.
Right. The argument here is all about reproductive strategies. Men competed with each other to reproduce, so over millions of years, they evolved to be aggressive, ambitious, and competitive. Those genes got passed on. Women, on the other hand, needed help and protection during pregnancy and while raising small children, so they evolved to be submissive, nurturing, and to seek protection from successful men. The classic man-hunt, woman-nest model.
It sounds scientific. It has a certain evolutionary logic to it.
It does, until you look at some of our closest relatives in the animal kingdom, like bonobos and elephants. These are highly intelligent, social animals who live in matriarchal societies.
The bonobos are fascinating. The females are physically smaller and weaker than the males, but the females absolutely run the show.
And how do they do it? Cooperation. The females form these incredibly tight social networks. If an aggressive male gets out of line and starts harassing a female, a whole gang of her female friends will descend on him and chase him off. The male is stronger than any one female, but he is much weaker than 3 or 4 females working together.
And humans are the undisputed champions of cooperation on this planet. Our entire success as a species is built on it.
Exactly. So if humans are successful because of cooperation, and if females are supposedly more dependent on social bonds and better at creating them, then basic logic dictates that women should have used those superior social skills to organize and outmaneuver the more aggressive, isolated men.
They should have formed a global bonobo-style sisterhood and taken over. Biology enables it.
By all evolutionary logic, yes,
Yay.
they should have. But for some reason, they didn't. Or at least if they did, we have no record of it. It seems they mostly organized under the authority of men.
And that is the deeply frustrating conclusion of this entire section, isn't it? We have eliminated all the easy answers. It's not muscles. It's not just aggression. It's not a clear genetic imperative. And we are just left with a giant blank space. A question mark.
It is arguably the biggest single gap in our understanding of human history. We simply do not have a good, convincing explanation for why patriarchy became the universal default. It seems to be some complex mix of biology and culture, but the recipe is lost to time.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We've looked at how these imagined orders create hierarchies that feel natural, but are actually, well, often just historical accidents.
We've seen the vicious circle that keeps groups like lower castes or racial minorities trapped long after the original laws and justifications have changed.
And we've smashed our heads repeatedly against the great wall of the gender puzzle.
It is a lot to digest. But I think if there's one key takeaway, it's that justice is not a product of nature. Nature does not care about justice. Nature allows for inequality, suffering, and domination. It's just the way things are.
So justice is something we have to invent. It's part of the script we have to consciously choose to write.
Precisely. Most of the hierarchies we live with are just old accidents that hardened into powerful myths. But the hopeful part is, because we wrote them, we can also rewrite them.
And that brings me to a final thought I want to leave everyone with. We just spent a lot of time talking about how stable and universal patriarchy has been for thousands upon thousands of years. It survived the fall of empires, devastating plagues, world wars, and revolutions. It looked eternal and biologically determined. But then, look at the last 100 years.
It's a blink of an eye in historical terms. Not even.
In just a century, literally 1 or 2 human lifetimes, we've gone from a world where women couldn't vote or own property in most places, to a world with women leading nations, running massive corporations, and the widespread legalization of same-sex marriage. The entire gender structure that seems so permanent is collapsing and reshaping itself at lightning speed.
It is arguably the fastest and most fundamental social revolution in the history of our species.
So here's the question for you to mull over. If patriarchy, the longest-running, most stable dominance hierarchy in human history, turned out to be just a story that millions of us collectively decided to stop believing in, what else is fake? What about capitalism? Or the nation-state? Or even the idea of human rights?
Which of the eternal truths that we hold sacred today will our grandchildren look back on and laugh at, the same way we laugh at the divine right of kings?
That is a provocative question. It makes you wonder what the next imagined order will be.
Something to keep you awake at night.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
A pleasure, as always.